This is a Kenmore Model 860 backless canister vacuum. I picked this up from another collector last week. It's a relatively rare vacuum. You don't see too many of these anymore. These were also sold as a Eureka here in the States, and then over in Europe they were sold as an Electrolux. Interestingly enough, for the United States market, they threw in basically a basic low-end Eureka vibrogroomer power nozzle with a wooden brush roll, as opposed to the metal brush roll, which is a little more common to see. These were one of the earliest bagless cyclonic as in we know today, canisters that were sold. And I believe originally the Swedish Electrolux company made these to compete with the Dyson DC02, as these were launched not too long after that. And then not too long after that, they started making them both for Sears under the Kenmore name, as well as for Eureka, which they sold in Eureka dealers. It's quite a bulky machine. I was very surprised. It's a lot larger than I thought it would be. It has pretty decent power too, and filtration is alright. It has a pretty well sealed HEPA filter, but there's a foam filter that sits behind here that my vacuum collector friend actually made a new filter out of because the filter was falling apart. So this is actually a shark filter, just squeezed in there. And then you have, it's a single cyclonic system, so it's hard to see, but this is basically the part that's the dirt spins around right here. Much like a shark, you have that mesh piece at the end. So it's kind of an unusual thing where it kind of spins around this cyclone and then it just falls to the bottom. It was a very, I guess, clever way to get around the Dyson design. So it's not nearly as efficient, but I guess for the time it was still pretty much the best you could get for not being a Dyson. Interestingly enough, while this was sold at Sears and they were not giving these things away, they were about $300 back in the day, which was a decent amount of money for a bagless canister vacuum 20 some years ago. Around the same time period, they were making the Destiny 3000, which was the Phantom Lightning, basically rebadged as a Kenmore, also for Sears. So it's kind of interesting. They both had bagless canisters around the same period. One of the other reasons why I wanted this machine is I have what's basically the matching upright to this. So this Eureka here was made by the same company that made this machine, and they both came out around the same time period, and both models were sold as either a Kenmore or Eureka, but I just happen to have the Eureka version of the upright and the Kenmore version of the canister. But like I said, there were Eureka's versions of the canister and Kenmore versions of the upright, so both were made under the same names. And there are minor differences between the Eureka and Kenmore versions. Now, as far as the Kenmore and Eureka versions of the canister, I'm not quite sure, other than the color, but it's a decently powerful canister. I was quite surprised. There's no motor speed control. You just have this air release valve right here. Your power switch is right here. You also have a switch on the handle for the power nozzle. It does have a cord retractor. It's a little slow, so you kind of have to help it back in. But I guess for probably about a 21, 22-year-old vacuum, I guess you can't expect much at this point. It does have some cosmetic issues. I think there's some minor fraying on the cord down there, and part of the housing has a crack on the front of the power head, so I'll have to get my adhesive out to try to mend that. But there is some bearing noise, which is to be expected. I mean, these vacuums did let a little dust into the motor, but it's not that bad. It's not the worst I've ever seen. So we'll give this a quick run, just so you can see how it works. There is another video of this vacuum on YouTube from Performance Reviews, but I do not believe it's his machine. I believe it's just a friend's of his. Another interesting stylistic technique of this vacuum is a translucent body, at least some of the pieces. That was a very popular styling trend in the late 90s into the early 2000s with modern electronics. So I think that's an interesting thing. I think the Eureka version was very much the same in that respect. I think it also had translucent colors, so an interesting styling trend of the time that maybe you don't see too much today, but still is kind of unique. So we'll just plug this in quick. It does work quite well, better than I really thought. We'll start by just using the canister, and then I'll hook up the power head. And I believe the light does still work on the power head. Let's see. So it works pretty well. I mean, not the best, not the worst. I think you got maybe a quick glimpse. There was something that was in the hose that I guess didn't make it all the way through the machine when I was using it last, and it just sucked in, and maybe you saw it swirl around here. But it appears that it kind of just swirls around here and falls to the bottom, because you see that this dirt that I just picked up down here was kind of blowing, but it wasn't really spinning. So again, a very primitive bagless design, but at the time they couldn't really do anything else because Dyson had all the patents on that technology. So, but that is the Kenmore Canister. It's a pretty obscure vacuum, and I hope you enjoyed the video.